This is happening. This is real life in action.
You can't repeat the past. You can't repeat the past. No.
Are not getting along with each other, and over 2 years body cam footage from police being called to the neighborhood is recorded, and this ends very badly. If you love documentaries, hit follow because I post daily and you'll never miss out on what's new. This entire documentary is only body cam footage and recordings from the actual time of events. Most true crime documentaries are people retelling the story of something that happened, whereas this one, you literally get to watch it while it happens. There is no disputing the things that these people say to each other and the interactions that are had. And in hindsight, it is very creepy. And it is extremely powerful because without saying anything, it is saying more than any other true crime documentary I've seen. Let me know what you think about this in the comments.
I sentence you to life in prison. 114 stab wounds, 49 defensive wounds, 35 wounds to the head and neck, 29 to the back and shoulder, and 6 fatal wounds. This court has reviewed and seen more than its fair share of autopsy photos. The autopsy photos in this particular case were particularly difficult. The 49 defensive wounds indicate that Tristan Bailey was conscious, she was aware, she was doing everything she could to fend off this attack. She suffered a painful, horrifying death from someone that she trusted. Her screams were most likely stifled by her own suffocating lungs. He lured her into a secluded place in the woods near his home, a person that she trusted, and he led her there under false pretenses.
This is the most dangerous girl in the United States, and the crimes she committed will leave you in shock. Emily, a girl of just 16 years old, caught the attention of Mark, an employee at a small pharmacy in Houston. Every day, she appeared with a large backpack on her back, and her repetitive behavior quickly sparked Mark's curiosity. He started wondering what Emily was buying so frequently. One day, he decided to observe her discreetly, and that's when he noticed something strange. Emily always grabbed multiple packs of wet wipes. No girl her age would have a reason to use so many wipes. Every day, with a growing feeling that something was wrong, Mark decided to follow Emily. After she left the pharmacy, she walked about 15 minutes until she stopped in an isolated area far from any activity. Mark approached silently, and what he saw was so disturbing that he didn't think twice before calling the police. Emily was arrested immediately, but on the day of the trial, she revealed something that left everyone in shock. What she was doing with those wet wipes is absolutely terrifying. Follow me and comment "arrest" for part 2.
Got the sauce, the boss, of course, man. Who's in the building?
The video I just showed you allegedly depicts the death of this man, Hugo Figueroa. Hugo was the nephew of famous Mexican singer Joan Sebastian, and Hugo was a rising name in the music industry in Mexico. About a year ago, when Hugo was traveling in Mexico, he was suddenly approached by 7 armed men in a place called Plaza de Toros, or La Aurora. Now, allegedly, the men that kidnapped Hugo were from the Los Viagras cartel, and it's been suspected that Hugo himself had ties to their rival cartel, the CJNG. There's more video that was released of Hugo's abduction that's simply too disturbing to show on TikTok, where masked men tell him you're not at home anymore, don't mess with the people of the hills, and they keep telling him to shut up and threatening him. Shortly afterwards, Hugo's dead body was found on the side of the road in an area close by. It's unknown exactly what Hugo was killed for, but this is just yet another reason why, if you already don't understand why, you do not mess with the Mexican cartels. And if you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to my podcast, Murder in America, that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
I can't believe somebody would just do that to me. They stripped her naked, beat her, stuffed wooden sticks into pants and throat, and choked her neck with her shirt. One of the boys was still urinating at the girl, while the other children held her down, making it impossible for her to resist. And her mother has stated that her young daughter has suffered a mental trauma that will never heal.
She was screaming when she woke up. She said they killed me. She thought she was dead.
This is the most heartbreaking case I have ever encountered. A 5-year-old girl was SA and brutally abused by 3 children as young as 8 or 9 years old, and then abandoned in a field. You can never imagine how terrifying they were. That night, she suddenly received a call from her cousin claiming that her daughter was missing. She went out to look for her and met 2 children, around 8 or 9 years old, who were playing. They both said they had never seen Anne-Marie. Subsequently, they reported to the police. However, at this moment, the 2 children she had met before and their mother took the initiative to find Antavia, saying that they actually knew where her daughter was and took her to a field where her daughter was lying there. The authorities claimed that 3 children aged between 8 and 10 were involved in the incident. They took the initiative to approach the girl, acted very friendly, and held her hand, luring her to the field.
Kada Scott has been missing for 2 weeks, and the more we learn about her accused kidnapper, the more urgent her search becomes. On the morning of October 5th, Kim and Kevin Scott realized that their daughter Kada never made it home from her overnight shift at a senior living facility. And this was really unlike her. Kim calls Kada, but her phone goes to voicemail over and over again. She decides to call the facility, and she gets conflicting stories. One person tells her that the last time they saw her was at the end of her shift at 6 in the morning, and the other person says that they last saw her at the beginning of the shift at around 10:30 to 10:45 at night. Growing worried, her parents decide to call the police, and they all meet back up at the facility. They found that her car was still in the parking lot, but her keys, her iPad, her phone, and other belongings were all missing. They also learned that there's no cameras in the parking lot, so there's no way to see what happened to her. And her family's worry only grew because days before her disappearance, Kada was receiving harassing phone calls from somebody that they didn't know. Police are able to track her phone, and they learn that the last person she was in contact before disappearing was 21-year-old Keon King. At this point, we learned that Keon has a pattern and a criminal record to go with it. Earlier this year, he was arrested for the kidnapping of another woman, but the charges were dropped after she did not appear in court to testify. We also learned that a third woman filed a protection from abuse order against him. There was also a TikTok video of Keon peering through a woman's window, and we learned that it's part of the case that is now being refiled. They also learned that her phone last pinged at the 55-acre Aubrey Arboretum, which is about 10 minutes from her workplace, but it's still unknown if police found anything here. By this point, the FBI and Philadelphia homicide detectives joined the case. According to her dad, it's not because they're treating her case as a homicide, but because they want all hands on deck to find her. 10 days after her disappearance, Keon King surrendered himself to police. They immediately started searching for his car, believing that Kada must have been in it at some point. Police receive a tip to an abandoned middle school. Here they find a phone case, glasses, and a card with Kada's name on it. However, there's no sign of Kada herself. Around this time, they find his car in East Falls, and at the time, it's still being processed for evidence. Keon King is now being charged with Kada's disappearance, as well as imprisonment, stalking, and other charges. Authorities have also refiled those original kidnapping charges against him from earlier this year. Kada's family urges anyone with information to please come forward. They've also set up a GoFundMe to help pay for search efforts.
She boiled her husband and ate him. Omaima Nelson was born in 1968 in Cairo, Egypt. At age 6, she underwent female genital mutilation, a procedure involving removal of the clitoris without anesthesia, leaving lasting physical and psychological trauma. In 1986, she moved to the US after marrying Roger Stainbrook. The marriage ended, and she later lived in Southern California, working as a nanny and part-time model. She had a criminal record for theft, assault, and violent behavior during sex. In October 1991, Omaima met 56-year-old William Bill Nelson, a former pilot and convicted drug smuggler. They allegedly married weeks later on November 1st in a private Egyptian-style ceremony. By Thanksgiving weekend on November 28, 1991, their relationship took a deadly turn. During what Omaima later described as a bondage sex session, she claimed Bill raped her. She retaliated by striking him with a lamp, stabbing him with scissors, and bludgeoning him with an iron. After killing him, Omaima dismembered his body, including castrating him, in their Costa Mesa apartment. According to her confession, Omaima claimed she boiled her husband's head and even cooked his ribs in barbecue sauce. Though she later denied cannibalizing him, neighbors recalled hearing the garbage disposal running for hours as she allegedly tried to grind up bone and tissue. In the days after the murder, Omaima tried to recruit help from ex-boyfriends to dispose of the body, offering money in return. One of them, 27-year-old Jose Esquivel, alerted authorities. When police searched her apartment on December 2nd, 1991, they uncovered the grisly remains and arrested her. The scene shocked even seasoned detectives. Police later discovered his decapitated head in the freezer, hands cooking in oil, and various body parts stored in containers throughout the apartment. Omaima Nelson's trial began on December 1st, 1992. The defense argued that Omaima was a victim of years of abuse and acted in self-defense. Psychiatrists diagnosed her with PTSD and borderline personality disorder. Prosecutors argued she killed for financial gain and tried to cover it up, pointing to her calculated dismemberment and cover-up. She was convicted of second-degree murder on January 12, 1993, and sentenced to 27 years to life that March. Her 1995 appeal was denied. She served time in multiple California prisons and was denied parole in 2006 and 2011. In prison, she became a born-again Christian and married a disabled man via correspondence, receiving conjugal visits until his death in 2008. As of June 2025, Nelson remains incarcerated and is eligible for parole in 2026. Her case remains one of the most infamous examples of domestic homicide and alleged cannibalism in U.S. history.
So check this crazy ass loophole I just went through. I nutted in the condom, put water in the condom, okay? Then you want to take it a step further, put the condom over a light. At that point,
in a shallow pit about half a mile from the road, and sadly, this was only 2.5 miles from their home. All this time, they were right there, but what's weird is that this specific area had already been searched numerous times. Surrounding the boys were a bunch of rusted bullets and other metal objects. Some of the bullets were spent, but there were also several unfired bullets too, including tangled up in some of the boys' clothes, which brings me to my next point. Some of the boys' bodies were found almost contorted or buried in a strange position. It was reported that one of their torsos was found above their shoulders. And what's odd is that all of their clothes were tied in tight knots together. And some of those unfired rusted bullets were found in one of the boys' underwear. So right off the bat, this definitely screams foul play. Police initially just tried saying that all 5 of the boys just died of hypothermia. The parents, on the other hand, were not buying this, and they demanded a full investigation, but also because their remains were located a really short distance from a nearby village that they all knew really well. So to their families, it made no sense why or how they could have just died of hypothermia instead of just going to get help, which was right there. Police said they died of hypothermia because it was a really rainy and cold day when they disappeared, but their autopsies show otherwise. 3 of the boys' skulls showed signs of blunt force trauma, possibly from the metal objects that were found buried with them. The other 2 of their skulls had a small hole in them, which was reportedly so small that it couldn't be identified how they got it. Some think those holes could have been gunshot wounds since there were bullets surrounding them, but this has never been confirmed. The medical examiner stated that the condition and the position of their bodies indicated that they were buried immediately after they died, because otherwise animal activity would have been present, which it wasn't. So police quickly changed their manner of death to homicide and continued investigating. But because of how many years had passed, what little evidence was left behind proved to be unhelpful. As of today, their disappearance and murder remains unsolved, despite finding them after so many years. And although we don't really know what happened to the Frog Boys, there are a few theories. Theory number 1 is that they were lured to Mount Warriong by someone that they knew, someone they trusted, and once out there all alone, they were killed for some unknown reason. Police believe that whoever did this knew the terrain really well, though. Theory number 2, and really the only other theory, is that the South Korean military was involved. I know this sounds a little out there, but there's actually quite a bit of evidence suggesting they could be involved. Okay, so the boys disappeared in an area on Mount Warriong that was close to the military base. Some people believe that they were conducting a shooting practice that day and accidentally shot and killed one of the boys. And in a panic, they killed the other 4 and buried them to cover it all up. The military has come out and said that since that day was a holiday, no training or shooting practice was scheduled. And they also initially denied that any of their officers were out firing that day. But years later, an officer reportedly admitted that the bullets found in one of the little boys' clothes came from their shooting range. And what's also odd is that in the months following the boys' disappearance, before they were found, all of the boys' families got a call in the middle of the night from a military official. This official wanted them all to come out to the base despite it being at night, so they did. When they were all there, the military official told them that he could give a power to one of the parents to help them find their children. What makes people believe this theory that the military was involved was where the boys were eventually found. They were found at the base of the mountain and not far from the military base itself. This most definitely was a spot that was thoroughly searched multiple times, so it begs the question, why weren't they found sooner? Evidence points to them having been buried right after they died, not sometime later, which means they were there the entire 11 years. This has made people, including the boys' families, believe that the police were helping cover up the situation to protect the military. And one thing that kind of fuels the speculation is the fact that the police never interviewed any of the military officials that day. The families have publicly criticized the police for the way they handled this. According to them, authorities never even interviewed key witnesses in this case, one of which was a fourth grader who was in the area the day the boys disappeared. The boy reportedly heard a horrendous scream coming from the mountain, and he tried telling police, but no one ever officially interviewed him. So those are the two main theories in this case, but as of today, it remains unsolved. I guess the only good thing to come out of this is the abolition of the statute of limitations for murder in South Korea. In 2006, the South Korean statute of limitations for murder was only 15 years. So if you committed a murder and somehow got away with it for 15 years, you wouldn't be able to be charged for it if you were ever found past that point. But thanks to high-profile cold cases just like this one, and with pressure from the public, this was abolished in 2015. It's just so scary to me how you can disappear like this and not be found for decades, even though the entire time you were right there, in an area that has been thoroughly searched, literally 2 miles from your home in this case. It's just sad, and I hope that one day these boys get justice. But it's now been 34 years, and whatever happened to these boys out on that mountain remains a mystery, and whoever did this to them is still out there.
So this was an Australian cult called The Family, and this cult liked to steal babies. The cult stole 28 babies, and I can almost guarantee you, I think I might be even confident in promising you, that you have never heard of a cult more insane than this one. Anne Hamilton, she was actually born Evelyn Grace Victoria Edwards. She later changes her name, but she was the oldest of 7 kids to her parents, and they grew up in the town of Sale in Australia. Her father did nothing. He was very distant from the family, constantly in and out of the picture, and her mother was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, so she was always in and out of hospital. So both parents overall were pretty absent. In her early 20s in 1941, Anne married a man called Lionel Harris, and they moved into a cute house together, had a baby, settled down. It was in 1955 when the family decided that they wanted another baby, but this time they wanted to adopt one. So in 1955, on the way to go pick up this baby to adopt, Anne's husband gets in a terrible car accident and he passes away. And in what felt like 2 seconds, Anne lost not only her husband, but also the child they were going to adopt, because after the car accident, the adoption facility did not want this baby to be adopted by a single parent. And it was following that everything changed for Anne. She changed her name, changed her lifestyle, changed her hobbies, and basically transformed herself into this new person. She became obsessed with yoga, eventually opened up her own studio, teaching mainly middle-aged women, but her practice was different because she started mixing in spiritual and philosophical teachings, mixing Hindu and Christian ideas and beliefs while also preaching about supernatural beliefs and practices. Like, it got to the point that in her studio, while she was teaching yoga, they would play around with Ouija boards. It was like to that level. In class, they would also talk about marital problems, and Anne would encourage her students, I guess, I don't really know what to call them. She would encourage them to leave their husbands, and the women would. They would leave their husbands, they would move out of their house and move in with Anne, pretty much starting to create this little cult of hers. So Anne starts thinking, oh wow, I really do have a lot of influence over these women. They kind of believe everything that I say, and I kind of love that, and I want more of it. In 1962, Anne realized that to create growing her cult, she needed more power, she needed more control, and what was the easiest way for her to get that? In her head, she thought, I need a powerful man. I need someone who is intelligent, who has the right connections, knows the right people, and has a lot of influence over other powerful men. Raynor Johnson, he was a perfect guy. He was intelligent. He had a PhD in physics. He was high up at his job at the University of London. He had the right connections with respected professors, politicians, doctors, lawyers, and teachers. And most importantly, like Anne, he also had a big interest in the paranormal spiritual world. Raynor was married with children. And something that you need to know about Anne is that she was very intentional with everything that she did. It was always very calculated. So she went out and started looking for people who knew Raynor, who could give her information about him. And then she showed up to Raynor's house. She knocked on his door and told him that she could predict the future. And then she started throwing out all of these facts that she knew about him that she gathered from information from other people. And Raynor obviously doesn't know that she has done that. So he's listening to her and he's thinking, oh, wow, this woman can predict the future, because how else would she have so much information about me and or my life? So in 1963, Raynor, his wife, and his children fully commit to Anne and her cult. And this is pretty much when the cult is officially created. And now the main goal is to keep on recruiting people. So Raynor would talk to his businessmen friends and he would say, guess what? There's this lady. She teaches yoga. Her classes are amazing. She's incredible. She can predict the future. She also has supernatural powers and she's just amazing. So you should get your wife to go to her yoga classes. And the men would get their wives to go. And slowly but surely, this cult starts growing and Anne continues teaching yoga, but in reality, she's just kind of teaching nonsense, telling her, I guess now cult members, all about how she is Jesus Christ, how she has all these powers, about how the end of the world is coming, but if they stay with her in her cult, she will be able to save them when that day comes. And one of her favorite things to talk about was about how she was so powerful that she never aged. She never got older. This was her claim, and she would lie to her cult members about how old she really was. She would lie about her age, and then she would secretly go and get facelifts to surgically pull up her face to avoid wrinkles so that her followers would really believe that she didn't age. No offense, but that's why her hairline is so far back, because this was in the 60s and she got a handful of facelifts done and her hairline just kept getting further pushed back further and further every time. So there's that. But Anne and Raynor decide that it's time to name the cult. And are you ready to hear the name they picked out? They named it the Great White Brotherhood. Yeah, I don't really know how they came up with that one, but they did. More and more people of power keep joining the Great White Brotherhood. And again, this was a very calculated move for Anne because she uses that to her advantage. So for example, some of these were doctors, and she would get these doctors to get her substances so she could feed to the other cult members to make it easier to brainwash them, because they would start to hallucinate and then they would believe everything that was coming out of Anne's mouth. That was only one of the things that she did with the substances. But secondly, she would use these substances to purposefully make her members very ill without their knowledge. And then she would stop giving them the substances and then they would get better. And she would claim that she healed them because she has healing powers, because she was the female reincarnation version of Jesus Christ. One of the doctors that Anne met was an older lady named Joy, and Joy was the owner of a psychiatric hospital. Anne managed to brainwash her, and when Joy passed away, in her will, she left her psychiatric hospital to Anne. Do you see where this is going? Because you hear this and you probably think, this is insane. It's so easy to say, well, why didn't the cult members just leave? If they didn't want to be a part of the cult anymore, why did they not just walk away? And the answer to that is that they could not. Usually it's already so difficult to try and leave a cult in the first place, but in this case, Anne made it 10 times harder. Because if someone talked about leaving or threatened to leave, Anne would say that they were crazy, and she would get doctors, members of her cult, to sign off on papers to admit that person to her psychiatric hospital against their will. Yeah, if you want to leave, too bad. Anne is going to convince everyone that you've lost your mind, that you've gone crazy. You will get sent to the hospital where people will think that you're crazy. You will be fed medications and substances that you do not need. You will be given treatments that you don't need, sometimes even surgical procedures, full-on surgeries that they did not need, until they eventually started to really lose their minds a little bit. And she didn't only do this with cult members. She actually did it anytime that it was convenient for her. In 1968, Anne meets a man called Bill Byrne, and she falls in love. She wants to marry him. However, Bill is married. He has a wife, but he does really also take a liking to Anne. So what does Anne do? She gets her cult member doctors to sign off on papers to get Bill's wife admitted to the psychiatric hospital against her will. And just like that, she's now out of the picture. And her and Bill start dating, and then they get married, and this cult just continues to grow. We don't know exactly how many people were in the cult at its peak, but we know that it was at least 500 people. 500 people brainwashed, manipulated, and completely underneath Anne's control. Back in 1962, Anne had purchased a house in Ferny Creek, and to keep control of this cult, she obviously wants them to all be as close together as possible. So her followers start purchasing homes in the same area right next to Anne's. One person does, and then another, and then another, and then another. And it's so sick and twisted, but they slowly pretty much start building this little community community of their own. And her followers, some were doctors, other were lawyers. They were well-respected people and they had money, and Anne wants more power, more control. So then she makes it a rule that every follower or member, whatever you want to call them, everyone had to give 10% of the money that they made to Anne. And it got to a point that she was worth $50 million because she was collecting money from so many.
This paperboy went missing for 24 years until one day his mom received a mysterious package. 12-year-old Johnny Gosh woke up early one morning to deliver newspapers to his neighborhood in West Des Moines, Iowa. A few minutes into his route, a strange man with dark hair and a mustache stopped him to ask for directions. He was freaked out and began to walk away, but when he turned his back, the strange man was still following him and he kidnapped Johnny. A few hours later, Johnny's parents received a call from a neighbor who hadn't yet received their mail. And when they went to go look for him, all they found was a wagon full of newspapers. The police assumed that Johnny ran away, but the boy was missing for 24 years until one day his mom received a mysterious package. Before I say what's in it, click the link in my bio and get Curiosity Stream. This was from one of their many documentaries, and you can get your first year for $15. She opened the package, and inside were photos of Johnny and other boys being tied up and abused.
There are some crazy things going on in the world right now. A 34-year-old blind man can now see after having his tooth implanted in his eye. I have to read more. He apparently spent over 2 decades trying to find a solution for his vision, and apparently his tooth was pulled, then flattened, and then a small hole was drilled into the center so that it could be used like a lens. And the crazy thing is they use a tooth because the body has a less likely chance of seeing it as a foreign object and rejecting it. The things we can do as humans. Wow. Apparently, the Ghost of Yote's director celebrated the delay of GTA 6 so that they can release their game without any distraction. I played a few hours of it, and it's pretty great. Police in Germany were called to investigate a suspected ding-dong ditcher. When the police got to the scene, they just realized there was a slug on top of their Ring doorbell button. A woman from Virginia asked ChatGPT to generate her lottery ticket numbers. ChatGPT got 4 out of 5 of them right, and she won $150,000.
Did you know some angels are so scary, even demons are afraid of them? One of those angels is known as the Archangel of Death. And he's probably the most terrifying angel I've heard of. This angel refuses to show his true form, because just seeing him can drive demons and lower-ranking angels to insanity, and will instantly end a human's life. But if he ever does show you his true form, you'll see that he's entirely covered in tongues and eyes, and the number of tongues and eyes on his body are constantly changing to reflect the number of people who are currently alive on Earth. He also has 4 faces and 4,000 wings. Being one of God's oldest angels that came into existence, this angel is the embodiment of death itself, collecting all souls of people who passed away and taking them to the afterlife. Follow for more.
About you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only.
Walks into your room.
Shout out to King Saul's boss in the build-up.
There was once this guy called Lester Summerall who was going to bed like any other night when his window bursts open and a dark presence enters his room. Immediately he knew it was a demon. He said all of a sudden the demon began to shake his bed and moved it into the middle of the room. At that moment he jumped up and he commanded the demon to get out in the name of Jesus. Immediately the demon left out the window. Sitting on his bed, a little bit confused at the situation, he then commanded the demon back into his room and said, "Put my bed back where you found it and close the window on the way out in Jesus' name." The demon obeyed every command he gave and put the bed right back where it was. If you know you have power over the devil in the name of Jesus, then subscribe for more.
Shout out to Sauce the Boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout out to Sauce the Boss.
These are 8 horrifying facts that will probably keep you up at night. The pacu fish from South America has human-like teeth. There's a haunted Russian radio station. It's a low-frequency radio station that's been broadcasting since 1982, and no one knows where the broadcast is originating. When you die, your hearing is the last sense you lose. Speaking of death, finally, the death outnumber the living, 15 to 1. You swallow 1 to 2 cups of mucus every day. Pine trees can grow in human lungs. A man once went into surgery to remove what doctors thought was a tumor, but it was a pine tree growing in his lungs. There was a chicken called Mike the Headless Chicken. He lived for 18 months after its head was cut off. In 1800s, dentures were made out of the real teeth of deceased people. Yeah, with one dentist visit, you would have been eating with a dead man's teeth for the rest of your life. Like for part 3.
This is actually insane. A 23-year-old woman faked her entire pregnancy using a prosthetic baby bump, faking ultrasound scans, and even using a mechanical silicone baby to deceive her friends and family after giving birth. Bro, somehow she even convinced the baby's father. How? Now, pretending to be pregnant was the easy part. In public, she'd always wear a prosthetic, and online, she would post ultrasound scans and even come up with convincing details, like some of the tests showed that her baby had a heart defect. She had a gender reveal, a baby shower, and her loved ones turned up with expensive gifts like prams and a car seat. But when it came time to actually give birth, a little more tricky, but she was way too far to go back now. So she locked in. She gave birth completely alone, so great, and then began posting pictures of her newborn, which turned out to be a hyper-realistic reborn doll, which, for anyone who doesn't know, these dolls can move, have facial expressions, and even pee and poo, and are often used as a form of therapy for those struggling with infant loss, dementia, or infertility. But they can set you back hundreds, if not thousands. However, eventually her family started suspecting that someone was sus. They never heard the child cry, they weren't allowed to touch it, and at this point, realizing that you'd have to freaking adopt a child, send it off to college if you wanted to continue this shit, she decided to call it a day by telling her boyfriend, the father, that the child died. Glad she let him down gently. But by that point, it was too late, and it all came out when her mother reportedly discovered the baby doll in her bedroom. Now, she has since apologized, saying, "You didn't deserve to be lied to like that. None of you did. Everyone who came to the gender reveal, all the people who gave me gifts or support. I just didn't know how to stop once I started. And to everyone I made look bad along the way, the dad and his family especially, I'm sorry."
Can someone explain to me what this thing is? Supposedly, you can see if an app is spying on you. All you got to do is click the share button, click more, and if an unknown app appears before your contacts, delete it immediately. What would you do if you found this in your ear? What are you talking about? Did you know TikTok has a secret emoji? Just type the word cry, lowercase with the bars around it like this. Let's see who can actually do it. What would you do if you walked out your house and saw this?
About you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building.
Back on. Who else, man? Sauce the boss, man. Of course, Sauce. Back on. Who else, man?
Here are some interesting things that everybody in the world.
Yo, what's up? Here's some scary facts about our world that you probably didn't want to know. Part 6. Thinking too much can actually kill you. So, us going to school and college, high school, middle school even, is actually slowly killing us. If you sit in an old chair, couch, or other piece of furniture, you are more likely to get possessed than if you were to sit in a modern day one. Why? Because just like an Annabelle doll, a lot of furniture has been involved in paranormal and demonic rituals, and well, that puts you at a higher risk to be possessed. There's a river in China called the Yellow River that's not just polluted by trash. In fact, it's polluted with over 10
Sauce the boss in the building.
This 17-year-old boy died after a 911 dispatcher says, "Deal with it yourself." In 2015, a teenage girl named Esperanza made a 911 call after her friend Jaden was shot in a drive-by shooting at a house party. Matthew Sanchez, the dispatcher who answered the call, quit his job after the following audio clip was released to the public.
Keeping him alive. Okay, is he not breathing? Barely. There's one of us. One of us. It's okay. One of us. Yes. There you go, James. Good job. Just stay with me, okay? Okay? There you go. Good job, Jaden. Is he breathing? He's barely breathing. How many times did the tell you? Okay, you know what, ma'am? You can deal with yourself. I'm not going to deal with this, okay? No, my hand is fine.
This angel is worse than Satan. The Book of Enoch explained a group of fallen angels known as the Watchers, and what they did will shock you. I'll explain the worst of these angels at the end of the video, so stay until the end. There are 200 of these angels that fell, and here are a few of their names: Samiaza, Azazel, Armaros, Arakil, and Barakil. Now let me explain why these angels are so bad. Azazel taught mankind how to make weapons for war. This act alone resulted in chaos, even still to this day. But it gets far worse. The leader of these angels, Samiaza, is far worse than Satan himself. Here's why. Not only was Samiaza the one responsible for leading every fallen angel to sin, he also led a series of experiments with the other fallen angels. They created a series of twisted, disfigured beings with human DNA and animal DNA. This whole story is spoken about in the Book of Giants. It says the 200 angels chose animals on which to perform unnatural acts, including, presumably, humans. I plan on releasing a full video on this exact story. If you are interested in that, follow me and subscribe to my YouTube channel in my bio.
This is a story that shows you how real death can be. In Islam, when a baby is born, God gives the baby a name, a written life story, and a date of death. And on the day of death, nothing and no one will stop the angel of death. This is a story of a Lebanese family, a mother and her teenage son. The son and his friends plan a trip after their high school graduation to celebrate. They were planning to fly to another country. He told his mom about this plan, but she was very scared for him. He was her only son. She felt like he was still too young to travel on his own with his friends. She begged him for weeks. She begged him not to go, but he insisted. The night before his morning trip, the son packs his bags and is ready to meet his friends at the airport the next morning. The alarm doesn't usually wake this boy up. He always relies on his mom to wake him up. So he asked her to wake him up at a certain time before the flight. The mother's heart had a wrong feeling about this. She decided not to wake him up. She wanted him to be late and miss this flight. His friends gave up waiting for him, and they eventually took that flight. The plane crashes only minutes after takeoff from a technical failure. She immediately sees the news that the plane her son was meant to take crashes, and there are no survivors. She finally runs to his room to wake him up and show him the news. But her son was already dead. He had a stroke in bed the same morning. Whether he took that flight or not, he was meant to die on this day. One piece of advice: when your mother has a wrong feeling about something, listen to her.
If the thought of your own death isn't horrifying enough, consider that scientists are now saying that you actually will be aware that you're dead for up to 20 seconds. For several decades, scientists have been studying people who claim to have near-death experiences. Whether you believe them or not, they're studying them and finding out more about what actually happens in the brain as death takes over. Approximately 5% of dying patients and 10% of cardiac arrest patients describe having near-death experiences where they float above their bodies, they see a white light, they travel through a tunnel, they see
Someone please explain to me why a 14-year-old should be having any plastic surgery. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, recently a 14-year-old passed away after getting a breast augmentation, a liposuction, and a BBL, and her mother's boyfriend was a surgeon. On top of that, her biological father didn't even know the truth until the day of her funeral. So this mother, her name's Paloma, she shared custody of her daughter, which her name is also Paloma Nicole, with her ex-husband Carlos. On September 11th, she told Carlos that their daughter tested positive for COVID and that she was really sick, so they were going to be isolating together somewhere in the mountains in Mexico. Then on September 15th, Carlos was told by his ex-wife that Paloma was in critical condition and had a cardiac arrest because of COVID. 4 days later, Paloma was declared brain dead, and the next day, she passed away. So basically everything was happening so fast, and her father felt like something wasn't right. On the day of Paloma's funeral, his entire family noticed that this little girl that they all knew looked very different. So Carlos asks his ex-wife, why does Paloma's upper body and lower body look so different? And she's just very dismissive and denies everything. At the funeral, Carlos asked to be alone with his daughter, and even though his ex-wife refused to, he eventually was able to, and when him and his family examined her body, he saw scars and bruises everywhere. And it was confirmed that she had implants. Now, this story just gets crazier because it turns out that the mother's boyfriend, who's also a plastic surgeon, was the one who performed the surgery on this little girl. The fact that this professional went through with such an intense surgery on a child, and not just one procedure, but 3 at one time. Then the mother ended up confessing and said that this was an early present for Paloma's 15th birthday.
If you're alone right now, don't watch this video. In the winter of 2018, a man who was living alone in the mountains wakes up to find a red ball sitting on his front yard. He assumed the only neighbor he had must have kids, and so he kicks the ball over the fence, goes inside, doesn't think anything of it. That night, he wakes up to the sound of kids laughing outside of his window. He goes outside to check on them because it's the middle of the night, and there's no kids anywhere, but that red ball is back on his property. So he picks it up, brings it in his house, and goes back to bed. The next morning, he goes over to his neighbor's house to let them know that their kids are out in his yard in the middle of the night. But it turns out his neighbor is just some old man who lives alone, and there aren't any kids anywhere in the area. That night, he wakes up again to the sound of kids on his property, and when he looks outside, there's no kids, but that red ball is back on his property. Panicked, he runs downstairs to make sure the one he brought in is still inside, and it's gone. He checked every window and door, and everything was still locked. It didn't make any sense. He decides to look out the window one more time, and off in the distance is some weird, stiff figure watching him.
Insane Crimes, Part 1. In one of the dumbest crimes in history, an Arizona man who worked for UPS stole a diamond worth $160,000, then traded it for some weed. Instead of selling it or hiding it, he handed the massive gemstone to his dealer for a $20 bag of marijuana. The dealer, shocked by how valuable it looked, brought it to a jewelry store to get it appraised, and the person behind the counter instantly recognized it as stolen. Police were called, and within days, both the thief and the dealer were arrested. In the end, the man didn't just waste a life-changing fortune, he basically turned himself in for the price of a dub. On the other hand, in 1968 Japan, a man pulled off one of the most brilliant heists in history without the use of a single weapon. Disguised as a motorcycle cop, he pulled over a bank vehicle carrying over $10 million in cash and claimed it was rigged to explode. To make it believable, he lit a flare underneath the car and yelled for the employees to run. They bolted in fear as he calmly got in, drove off with all the cash, and vanished. Despite the largest manhunt Japan had ever seen, interviewing over 100,000 people, neither the thief nor the money has ever been found.
Combo Killer, the Skin Freak, and what is his true identity? We're going to go over massive spoilers in this video, but I do have a full playthrough of the entire game on my channel. I'm also super curious to see if you can guess which character the Skin Freak is as the video goes on. I want to start by mentioning that we are playing as a character named Belle. She has a new job in a new town because she's running away from her abusive father that's following her. During the game, we have to work an overnight shift to install new programs on the computers. We check in with the security guard here, Steve, and he tells us something crazy. The Skin Freak, who's been all over the news, has been found, and apparently it was our weird co-worker Harold. It kind of makes sense because Harold's been acting very strange and the Skin Freak's clothes were literally in his office. We then run into our coworker Lisa, who's here to get away from her husband. That's concerning and a bit suspicious, but okay. We meet a super creepy UPS delivery guy who's obsessed with getting close to us. And we also find a paper in our boss's trash can that confirms he was just recently diagnosed with skin cancer. And wait, our boss was the one who called us here off duty. Something isn't right. Something isn't adding up here. At this point in my playthrough, I was conflicted. I was suspicious of Harold, but not convinced just because the police said he was. Lisa being here is strange. The UPS guy was acting odd. Of course, it's strange my boss called us here, and my father has been following me for years. And now for the final spoiler warning, here's the big reveal. The skin freak breaks into the building, and we find Steve's dead body along with his...
My fault. The beats is blasting. The beats is beating. We got some shit to unbox because you know we have new decks on the way. Wait, new waves for the play bay. Tell them to go play with their mother.
My life, son.
Sauce the boss. It's his birthday. Everybody wish him happy birthday.
Oh, this is big right here, y'all. Everybody wish Sauce, the official boss, happy birthday, man. Let's go. Let's see it in the timeline.
Oh, man. We're back once again. You know, it's a beautiful day.
I like to wish.
If you're feeling down, just get you a bag of that. Just light up.
I like to wish.
Can't fire Mr. Head Can't greet him with two, only the third eye. Killer vision, DSPR, hospital. Let me on this track. Accidents and opera O's. Conscience, unconscious. Flow riding on my train. Denzel, Chris Pine, unstoppable. Albert Einstein. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Therefore, I'm flying off the tracks. Extraterrestrial blunt, I got it on my lap. When I land soul train line, hop up on my dad. Big fan, what they don't understand. I forgive them cause they don't really know no better. Hope let them walk on water. I'm dancing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with a polo sweater. How bad do you want success? I was holding my breath unconsciously. The conscious me woke up and came up for air. I turned 136 into the over there. Dancing with chopped, I guaranteed them in the dreams. Fire miss the clean. Dirty talk.